It is 7 o'clock on a Sunday night. It's a new time slot. Welcome to it. It's still that time of the evening when we engage with you on matters that affect you, matters that affect your family, matters that affect your community. Tonight, human rights or wrongs. It's topical. A very good evening to South African, those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical. Our digital audience with us tonight. Good to see them, good to have them on the program. And as I say every week, digital audience, please put up your virtual hand if you have any comments or questions for our guests. I'll do my very best to get you on air. Happy Easter to you all. It's a time of renewed hope and peace. But many say they're struggling to find peace and hope at this time. LGBTQIA+, it's an abbreviation, stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning, intersex, asexual, and more. A person's sexual orientation or gender identity, right? Uganda's anti-homosexuality bill in sharp focus this week, and the debate around the bill is definitely topical. Context. According to the European Parliamentary Research Service, and this was back in 2019, 3 out of 5 African countries have laws criminalizing homosexuality and the public expression of sexual or gender behavior that does not conform with heterosexual norms. Question: why are such persons still far from enjoying the same rights as other citizens? Here in South Africa, there's a strong constitutional commitment to protect LGBTQIA+ rights. Another question, is it a lived experience though? How prevalent is the perception that non-conforming sexual orientations and gender identities were brought to Africa by the West and are contrary to African values? We will discuss. We also have our producer, Hlela. She's standing by with community members to get their reactions on the latest developments. Stand by, Hlela. There you see her. We'll get to her in a short while, which leads us to our question of the week. And we're asking you, with regards to Uganda's anti-homosexuality bill, what's your views on it? And do you feel that it's going to be a snowball effect on the African continent? Come, let's get you some context. This is what the bill says. It talks about aiding and abetting homosexuality. It also talks about conspiracy to engage in homosexuality. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know. And it's Topical SABC Perspective coming up. Now, time for your roundup. All right, as you can see, big story. Thabo Bester, as you know, on this channel, the news comes first. Convicted murderer and rapist Thabo Bester found, and as you can see, it's a very popular story on YouTube. Let's take you to this. We're tracking developments. Google Earth's helping us do that. We are told that escapee Thabo Bester, together with Dr. Nandipa and a Mozambican national, were arrested in Tanzania. And we're told that the detectives from the Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences and Organised Crime Investigations Unit in the Free State and in Gauteng provinces were appointed to work round the clock on this investigation with track and tracing teams of the Correctional Services and Crime Intelligence. I want to just show you with regards to the exact distance that Bester, we're told, had to travel, all right? Let's try this one more time and give you a sense of this. Okay, it's roughly about 3,000 kilometers from Johannesburg or Bloemfontein right up to Tanzania, right? Arusha. That's where he was found. Keep it locked on to SABC News. We'll get you the very latest on that. Having said that, so many questions still remain. How did they slide through the borders, right? Where did they obtain passports? Whose body was found in the cell that Bester was reported to have died in? This is what authorities had to say.
The Minister of Police and the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services can confirm that escapee, Mr. Thabo Bester, or well known as Thabo Bester, with his accomplice, also known as Dr. Nandipa Magudumalong, with the Mozambican national, have been arrested in Tanzania.
Questions like the Mozambican national, where did he join them? We can't at this stage clarify as to where. Everything is we're still going to investigate and will determine as to what happened to that Mozambican and where did he join them in the process.
All right, back to our main topic tonight. And at this point, let's take a look at our regular feature. It's called Word on the Street. And we took to the streets of Mathole in Johannesburg, where opinions remained divided on Uganda's anti-homosexuality bill. Take a look.
I think somehow it's fair, but when it comes to death penalty, it's too harsh. Because even myself, I don't see any reason why a man can have feelings for another man.
I think it's a wrong decision by the Ugandan government because everyone has the right to choose how they live. The government is violating people's rights.
You might have your own perspective, the government might have his own perspective or reasons for doing that. When you go to other countries or check their constitution, it's a different story. And every country has its own constitution and they have to follow their constitution. So if their law forbids that, then it's forbidden.
I think that what's happening in Uganda is fair. Reason being, if we allow people to be other genders that we don't know, it's going to lack masculinity in guys and it's going to create a chaos in the world because we're going to be teaching children things that are not right.
My take, when we go to the Bible, God created man. And from men, when God saw men were alone, he made woman. So for myself, I don't have a problem with sexuality, but if we go biblically, it's wrong. God made man and God made woman.
Everyone who was born on this earth, we know that we have two different genders. So this one is a newly created gender which has to have some other organizations to push it into people. We have never had this in Africa before.
It is totally unfair for them to be against the LGBTQ community because I believe that everyone is supposed to live their life the way they want to live, as long as they don't bother other people who are not on the same community. Because I believe that we have to live, we're living in a democratic society, so I believe that they're supposed to leave them to live their lives. Why must they criminalize that? Because that's how they live.
All right, those are your thoughts. We will discuss in a short while. I want to give you a sense of what we know and why it matters. For that, as always, we turn to the magic wall and get you a sense of what we're talking about tonight. Uganda's anti-homosexuality bill, right? Principle of the bill, to establish a comprehensive and enhanced legislation to protect the traditional family. What does this mean in terms of the true meaning of traditional family? We will discuss. Prohibiting any form of sexual relations between persons of the same sex and the promotion or recognition of sexual relations between persons of the same sex. It goes on to say, to establish a comprehensive and enhanced legislation to protect the traditional family. It's that term again. What does it say? It says strengthening the nation's capacity to deal with emerging internal and external threats to the traditional heterosexual family. It goes on to say, with regards to the principles of the bill, it also speaks about protecting the cherished culture of people of Uganda, legal, religious, and the traditional family values of Ugandans against the acts of sexual rights activists seeking to impose their values of sexual promiscuity on the people of Uganda. And with regards to this one, the bill, what does it seek to? With regards to the children and youth, this is what the bill says: to establish a comprehensive and enhanced legislation to protect the traditional family by protecting children and youth who are made vulnerable to sexual abuse through homosexuality and related acts. Context, important, why this matters, perspective coming up. That's what the bill talks about. I want to bring in perspective, sentiment on the ground. We now bring in my colleague, Hlela Mqoko. She's live for us in Midrand. Hlela, what are people saying with regards to Uganda's bill?
Thank you so much, Blaine, and welcome to Centurion. We are very grateful to Professor Modisane. He opened his home to us to come and have this conversation. I'm with 3 members of the LGBTI and A community who are here to talk to us about their first-hand experiences on the being violated, and also they are going to tell us about how they feel and what do they think about the Ugandan bill that is being proposed now at Parliament. We're going to go first to Professor Cameron Modisane. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for opening your home to us. Please take us through, what do you see about this proposed bill in Uganda?
This proposed bill, I think, is quite draconian and is quite regressive in terms of it taking us back as a people and as queer people. I think it's affecting us throughout the continent. The fact that I believe over 38 African states they do criminalize homosexuality, and the fact that if this bill is actually passed into law, I think it'll send a message out there that queer people, the LGBTI community, they are free for all in terms of they can be persecuted, they can be killed, they can be ridiculed in public, which is something which we as activists we need to stand up against.
You are talking about 38 countries that have introduced something similar to Uganda. Do you think this is going to be an African narrative?
I think that's why we as the community, we need to actually make sure that this bill is not actually passed into law, because it's going to gain momentum. Even with us, South Africa, even though we might be protected by the Constitution, but I think over time, if ever these bills are not actually repelled, they might have a ripple effect and actually affect us as queer people given chance in South Africa as well.
Oluwethu, what do you think should be done to protect, to try prevent this bill from being approved?
I think, like what Prof said, us as the community, we need to unite and come together and send a message, a very strong message to Uganda. For instance, in South Africa, we already saw what Julius Malema did in the past week, where he actually came out and he spoke against the bill. So I think we need more leaders as well to come in and support us, because we can't do the work alone. We also need to be supported by leaders, politically and traditional and religious leaders.
Simpiwe, the bill is saying the LGBTQI people are practicing this thing. What do you say about that?
Thank you so much, Hlela. So they say we are practicing this thing, right? I think he said it, that I feel like also as queer people, we kind of also hate on each other most of the time. Like we do hate each other at some point, we bring each other down. He did say that I think it's about high time now that we actually come together, because this is something that we have fought for, and it's still a fight, even still today, that we are human. We need to be heard. We need to be seen. We're not different. Yes, being gay or being queer is something that we didn't choose. It's something that we were born with. So we just need to be seen and heard. So it's been like an ongoing fight, still happening till today. But then, yeah, I do believe that we have a lot of hate within the same community.
President Museveni feels that if same-sex couples raise kids, this is killing the family structure of the country. How do you feel about that?
I think it's ridiculous. I don't even know how to describe my feelings towards it, because I mean, I've worked in spaces, or I work in spaces where there are a lot of same-sex couples raising kids, and they turn out to be leaders and phenomenal leaders in our community. So for him to come out and say something like that, something that is also not factually true or proven, for him as a leader, it just also says something, or rather it's the type of person that he is. He's also not informed as a leader. So I would also be worried if I was Ugandan right now, in terms of saying what kind of a leader is he, if he's going to say or utter such words that speak against the human nature, because at the end of the day, we're still human. We are here. We have phenomenal people who are in spaces of leadership and who have been raised in same-sex couple households.
How does this affect South Africa, Professor Modisane? Just 1 or 2 seconds.
It does affect South Africa, because I was just talking to another colleague of mine, the fact that even currently landlords in South Africa, in Cape Town and in the CBD from Uganda, they're actually kicking out, if they suspect that you're gay, they're actually kicking you out or evicting you out of your apartment. So it's quite, it is affecting us as a community, and we need to apply pressure, make sure that we keep up the momentum, apply pressure in terms of having these campaigns and marches, etc., just to ensure that President Museveni does not actually sign this bill into law.
Thank you so much. Blaine, you've heard the views from the LGBTQI and A community. They are saying they're worried about this because this is really going to cause chaos in the country of Uganda. But Blaine, as Xhosas will say, asaz ukokba iyawuzala ngomonina, which means we don't know what the outcomes of this will be. But at this point in time, back to you, Blaine, in Auckland Park.
All right, Clelam Kuko, live for us in Centurion. Appreciate the context. We're going to get more context. Follow me. We're going to discuss this with regards to some of the terms that are used in this bill. Something called aggravated homosexuality. We've got the better minds on the program. Dilavi Kwagala, a.k.a. Papa D, is with us. First openly non-binary queer photographer from Uganda, among many other titles, as well as Dr. Motshekga is a historian and cultural expert. We also have a digital audience here tonight to weigh in on this matter. We're going to break it down further and pull apart this bill. Pros and cons. What are they? More next. Welcome back. You're watching It's Topical. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has defended the decision by the country's members to pass, members of parliament rather, to pass the controversial Anti-Homosexuality Plus bill. He was talking to our SABC international news editor, Sophie Mokoena, during his state visit here in South Africa a couple of days ago. This is what he had to say.
This is the mistake of Western countries. They are the ones who are provoking, because they are really, the English word is insufferable. You can't put up with their nonsense, because nobody concentrates so much on homosexuals, and nobody is hunting them. But because they come and want to force us to say homosexuality, oh yeah, that's how you get now a backlash. They are the ones who are provoking all this. Our attitude on homosexuality is that these are deviants. They are deviants from the normal. There is the normal, there is the deviation from the normal. But you don't kill. The deviation from normal is also part of nature. You can get somebody born with 6 fingers instead of 5. You can't kill him. But then you don't go around and say, oh, this one, the deviation is the normal. It is the provocation by the Western countries.
All right, that's the Ugandan president there. Let's discuss this issue. In studio, we have a non-binary queer photographer and human rights activist from Uganda, Dilavi Papa D. Kwagala, as well as cultural expert Dr. Motshekga is joining us today as well. Digital audience here with us tonight. We're going to get their take in a short while. To you first, Papa D. When you hear the president of Uganda saying that Western countries provoking and the terms that he used, how does it make you feel?
Just hearing about like this entire talk just breaks my heart, because when they speak about us, they don't speak about us as humans. It's like we are objects that don't have any feelings whatsoever. The introduction of the bill is technically one that doesn't allow for any survival of queer life in Uganda, because when you start by taking away every right that a human being or a lawful citizen deserves to have, it becomes a human rights issue. It becomes a security issue. It becomes a safety issue. So taking away from the whole queerness and homosexuality talk, but these are not the right steps to implement to people that are actually humans as well as you know. Talking about like the Western bringing in, you know, colonization and stuff, I can also stand here and say that English, you know, was brought by colonialism, right? So was religion. So, but at the moment, there's this selectivism that is happening within when colonialism matters and when it doesn't. You know, because if religious leaders in Uganda are making joint statements against homosexuality and protesting on the streets of Kampala and, you know, like different districts, which is then unfolding violence onto the people that are in those areas, what do we call that? Because when I was growing up, I was told that God is all loving and welcoming, come as you are, you know, we check the heart. Why all of a sudden my hairstyle or like, you know, who I choose to sleep with matters? Because at the moment, I mean, at the same time, I'm showing up as I am, as what it calls for. So if we're talking about colonialism, then let's start with, you know, defying religion as well. You know, what is the ground that they talking about this Jesus, you know, that they brought, that was brought upon to them as well. So I just don't understand.
Well, Dr. Motshekga, maybe you can jump in with regards to this perception that homosexuality was brought by the West into Africa and it's not part of the African values. Where do you land on that?
With due respect to those who hold that view, that is not true. I grew up in a traditional community. This phenomena existed. The only thing is that the traditional people had a way of dealing with it. Now, the problem is now when we get colonized, we were made to abandon our indigenous knowledge systems of how to deal with situations. And now that colonization was also a religious or spiritual capture of our hearts and minds, and we became the other than ourselves. And therefore, we tend to take decisions based on the religions and cultures of other people. And if you look at those religions, they are superficial, mythological, because if you say God created a man and then took a rib out of the man and created a woman, that is just a mythology. And now that has become a dogma that we live by, and we want to use that dogma to solve our own challenges. So I really think that it's unfortunate that as African people, we don't really sit back and say, who are we? What are the challenges that we are facing? And that those who are affected must be brought together with those who are not affected. Let's discuss. Because now I don't think that we understand the situation But we think we can resolve it by making a law. The law deals with the human behavior, but a human being is both spiritual and human.
Multifaceted, yeah.
Yeah, and then we don't know at the spiritual level what is the cause of this situation.
Yeah.
So I think that I would recommend that we stay away from the laws and sit with the affected persons, because they are still fully human and they find themselves in a situation and they have not created themselves.
Right. Let's just take it to a digital audience. Let's bring in Yoliswa Yako from the EFF. The EFF recently held a march in support of the LGBTIQ community. I just want to, Yoliswa, just read something out that was taken from the bill with regards to same-sex marriage. And this is what the bill says. A person who purports to contract a marriage with another person of the same sex commits the offense of homosexuality and shall be liable on conviction to imprisonment for 10 years. How does that sit with you?
Thank you very much. It really doesn't sit well with us. I mean, this is a blatant intrusion into people's lives, and it basically, it's a breach on human rights as a whole, basic human rights. We're not even speaking about at a broader spectrum of how you are infringing on someone's process in life. Because you meet someone, you don't intend to meet someone who's a certain way. I mean, you don't intend to meet somebody who's, for instance, in a wheelchair, or meet someone who's blind. You don't intend on meeting somebody who is somewhat in a different way that other people are made. But you decide to marry that person because you connect with that person. So how is it then that my decision to connect with that person and make a life with that person for eternity is then termed as a crime? How is it infringing on anyone's life for me to decide create a family with someone who I decide to make a family with? How does that harm anybody? How does that cut into someone's life in any way? It does not. So to me, to us as the EFF, it basically is a way of bullying people or suppressing people, infringing into just their lives. And there's no way to justify it that makes sense to anybody really who's contextualizing it in any way. There's just no way that you can dignify. There's no way that you can justify. There's no way you can conceptualize it. You can't even say that it's anti-African. You can't even say that it's anti-what, because how does it hurt the other person for me to decide to partner and be with someone that I want to be partners with?
All right, we've got hands up already. Matimo and then Charles. Matimo, to you first.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening to the viewers, and thank you for having me. I just want to echo some of the comments that have been made by Prof. Modisane. First of all, I mean, the bill, fuels violence against the queer community. This is a community that has been suffering for many years, and they've been, fighting for their rights across the world. And already there are stereotypes and stigmas attached to this group of people. So a bill like this will also give the community a sense of authority that queer people can be bullied in public. You can violate them, you can attack them. The second thing is the issue of discrimination. So if a bill like this goes forward and is passed into law, first of all, it means the discrimination of queer people in workplaces and in different places is going to continue, and nothing is going to change. Thirdly, it suppresses the voice of queer people. This is a group of people that is the same like any other person. So they deserve the same rights, the same opportunity like any other person. So a bill like this will further oppress and suppress them. And we cannot use laws to suppress people's voices. So on the basis that they practice, or they have a different view, or they have a different way of expressing their sexuality. Number 4, this is a reflection of the backwardness and unprogressive elements of the government of Uganda. Remember, the president of Uganda is an old man who's a dictator, and passing the bill into law also reflects on how the affairs of his state moves or are being conducted. So we cannot have a government in the 21st century that is still that want to pass such oppressive, bills. The fifth thing is the issue of the international image. I'm worried that they're sending a wrong, message to the international community.
Yeah.
So the government of Uganda has to do some serious introspection on how the international community is going to.
I also wonder what South Africa's role in terms of how we protect the rights of the LGBTIQ community, and what sort of responsibility we have as one of the leaders on the continent to persuade others in that direction. We'll talk about that in a bit. Charles, to you, and then Reverend Chisandi. Charles, if you can unmute. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay, so as someone that recently came out publicly as gay and started blogging about it on my YouTube channel, on my website at www.myownkinofwrongway.com and things like this, I'm listening to some of the people that were spoken to on the streets of South Africa and other places, and some people were mentioning things like spirituality, how it is a choice, how it is un-African and things like this. These are the things that you hear all the time, that homosexuality and queerness is something that is transferred into Africa from the Western world. This is absolutely a lie, totally. This is something that has been there. I am someone that grew up in Nigeria, in somewhere called Kano State. And growing up, there were a lot of LGBTQ plus individuals there, and it was very, very prominent. People knew about these things. They don't just speak about it. What has happened recently is that a lot of people feel like they have the right to say certain things because of they feel empowered, sort of, and I don't know why they feel empowered to do so. But the thing is, if you look at a lot of the African countries like Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, and things like this, there are other things to be worried about, aside from people's sexuality. At the end of the day, it is about humanity. We are all humans at the end of the day. We have other things that are really, really messed up, like there's inequitable distribution of resources, people are suffering. Those things are supposed to be tackled. There's corruption. People's sexuality shouldn't be a problem. And the thing is, being gay is not a choice. Nobody on the face of the earth will decide to choose something that everyone will be against them.
Charles, so point taken. Let's put that to Reverend Chisandi. Rev, being gay is not a choice, says Charles. Happy Easter, by the way, a time of renewed love and hope. Many are not feeling loved and hopeful. Your take?
Thank you so much, and good evening to everybody, and good evening, South Africa. Firstly, I want to say that God created everybody, and He loves each and every person. And number two, we must also understand that sexuality is actually, or sex is actually the idea of God. And He created systems in which a human being should be able to express their sexual feelings. And in doing so, He created a male and a female. And He put natural ways of expressing sexual desires. So in saying that, my take is this on the Ugandan issue, is that there are many things that the Bible do not agree with but are not criminalized. So when there are many issues that the Bible says these things are wrong, but they're not made criminal. So maybe our issue of discussion and debate should this be made criminal, because even the Bible does not agree with it, but there are many things that the Bible does not agree with which are not criminal.
So where do you land, Reverend? Just to be clear, as a Christian Reverend, you said with regards to the desires and if it's natural, do you think same-sex marriage or same-sex relationships are natural from your point of view?
No, I do not think they are natural, because when you look at the Bible, there is what we call natural theology, and we learn things from nature. So when you look at the way God created humanity, he created us in a specific way. A woman has got specific sexual organs and a man has got specific ones. So we cannot pervert that. So in my opinion, it is not natural.
All right, let me pick it up with Papa D, and just something to add to that. This is what the bill actually says as well. The Anti-Homosexuality Bill aims to protect the traditional family by strengthening the nation's capacity to deal with emerging internal and external threats to the traditional heterosexual family. If somebody is convinced, like what you've heard, that that is the case, how do you convince them otherwise?
I do have a 9-year-old, and I'm gay as they come. And for the fact that none of my parents are gay, I grew up in a very straight family. I didn't get to meet any real-life gay people until I was 21. So that shows you that, like, I grew up in church. Regardless of where you come from, this is not an influence. It's not a disease that you catch, you know. It's not a cult that you just join or like someone gets recruited to, you know. And I feel like them pushing for this whole parental family protection and all of that, we are also their children. You know, we also have children who are lawful citizens of the country. So in a way, where does that leave us? Are we protecting just one group of people that are normal, classified as normal and follow the rules, but we also not hurting anyone, you know? The president, Museveni, was saying that, oh, the homosexuals, they're the ones who are who keep bringing up this conversation. Honestly, we out here living our best life, right? You know, like in the background, we're not attacking anyone. We're not inflicting anyone. We have not gone to the parliament to say that everyone turn gay, you know, like we're not recruiting anyone. We are just simply being who we are. And now you're literally taking housing away from us by criminalizing landlords for, you know, renting to us. And guess what? In Uganda, like many people, you know, when they say that you can take the donkey to the water and then blah, 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 it's just literally the same, because we, as people have said, like we have people in Cape Town, landlords, Ugandan landlords, throwing out people, you know, from Uganda. And what does that mean? You know, it's a security issue where, like, you know, a landlord, a neighbor, a friend is obligated to report you to the police as being queer. People are going to use that as an advantage to harm others. And the violence is already ensuing. Whether the bill is being signed today or not, this violence has been happening. And the other problem for me that I have an issue with is, like, this bill has been used over the last 15 years, you know, to threaten the queer community. Every once in a while, whenever they feel like there is, you know, they need to distract the people from the important issues that are happening in the country, they scapegoat us. They create this, you know, smoke situation where then we are the scapegoats of the situation. You know, we don't have rights to medication, education, and privacy. How can anyone wake up and choose that life?
Let's just talk about that with Dr. Motshekga with regards, and you heard this term, traditional family. Who defines that, one? Who has a right to define that, two? And what is the fear here? Is it that heterosexuality, or rather homosexuality, is a threat to the traditional family? What's your thoughts on it?
It can be true, because people want to use African tradition, alternatively use the Christian tradition. The Christian tradition cannot be a traditional situation, because it was imposed on African people, disregarding what Africans were and how they were doing things. And I agree with the gentleman from Nigeria who says that homosexuality existed from time immemorial. It's just that it was dealt with differently in Africa. And also to penalize homosexuals does not serve a purpose, because the object of the law is to deter people from doing something that they're doing. Now, if a person has not created themselves and what they're doing is natural with them, how does a 10-year sentence deter them from continuing with that? So it really becomes inhuman,
Right.
because you are forcing a human being to do what they are not.
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
I think we must put the Bible out of this, because the Bible is not the only religious document. For instance, the oldest religious document in Africa is called Pert Emheru, the Book of the Divine Light. And it has a different concept of God. It says God, the Godhead itself, is both female and male. And at some point, there was a separation between the female and the male. And why should we be bound by the European Bible and ignore our own sacred literature, which is even much older than the Bible? And we also know that in the Bible, there are some books which were left out. So that Bible is not even complete. And who left out other books, and for what reason? So that's why I take the view that we need a conversation, we need an interfaith dialogue on this matter.
Reverend, when you hear what Dr. Motshekga has said, leave the Bible out of it, he says. What's your response?
Well, it is not possible to leave the Bible out. And when doctor says that the Bible is a new document, then I do not know. Maybe he must have missed some of the history of literature, because if you look at the Bible was not written by one person. It has been written over a period of time dating back to the people like Job. Now, and the Bible is not imposed on Africa. You must know that Africans used to travel to Jerusalem to be able to learn all these things. Now, the perceptions about God is, I said to you that the issue of sex and how you express it, it is the idea of God. It is not created by man. So if God wanted, he would not have given us sexual desires and sexual tools. So, for instance, if you look into all creation, human beings are the only ones that want to practice sexual perversion.
What if you feel as a person that this is who you are, and you can't live any other way? You are not being persuaded to become homosexual. It is who you are from your very core. How do you address that?
Well, that is very important, because whatever we are trying to do to persuade or to disagree, it must never at any time promote violence against another person. If I do not believe in what you believe, that does not mean I should promote violence against that. So if a person really thinks and they feel that is their call, then our responsibility is to show them the love of God and to be able to direct that, to say, look, this is the natural procedure that God has created. But my stance is this, sir. I do not promote violence against anybody. If somebody feels different sexually, we should never at any time promote violence against them.
All right.
I do not agree with that totally.
All right, let's go to Mpulusa, then Dali. Mpulusa?
Thank you very much for the platform. So my first comment was going to be on the idea that homosexuality is un-African. Because when you go back to the literature of Tamale, Amadume, Adesina, quite a number of them write about homosexuality that actually, well, same-sex relationships that existed pre-colonialism came. So that notion of that homosexuality is un-African, again, has to come back and be debated. But also, you asked the question about this whole concept of traditional family.
Yeah.
I'm also very concerned about the conceptions of African family, because when you look up African family, it gives you this family structure of a man and a woman and children, which again goes back to the idea of a nuclear family that is perpetuated by Western concepts. So there's this repetition of us actually adopting Western concepts and Western structures within African countries. And that is very problematic. But my biggest concern that is going to happen with this bill is that it is going to perpetuate a culture, number one, of homophobia, and number two, it's going to create a culture of targeted killings. If we know previously, whether it's in South Africa or anything before the adoption of democracy, is that with targeted killings, it doesn't matter whether one identifies and comes out publicly and identify that I'm homosexual or part of the LGBTQA plus community, but merely the fact that we see you or they physically see you as representing elements of how one would react or how one would act to a part of the LGBT, you become targeted of killings. We are going to get a big number of killings that are going to happen, but also it's going to perpetuate a culture of, and I hate using this term, corrective rape or curative rape. What's going to happen is that people, besides killing, they're going to start being targeted. That we already have a crisis within Africa of rape crisis. Now, this is just going to make it worse because now it's going to give people the right or entitlement to say that because there is a law that supposedly protects me if I'm against any gay person or lesbian person or intersex person, it's protecting me. Therefore, I can do or implement any harm or injustice to the other person. Therefore, a lot of people are going to actually do violence and perform violent acts on other people. But then again, I'm very concerned with breaking of international laws. You know, because in international laws, it's meant to recognize that everybody's rights are important in front of the state, and the state has the obligation and the right to protect everybody's rights. So therefore, why are these people's rights not being protected, and for whose benefits? Is it for hegemonic masculinity, patriarchal norms? Still something that I'm very concerned about because there's a lot of that.
I'm also trying to understand is that where is the fear here? You know, what's the purpose, the main purpose of this? Is it impacting, are you fearing that homosexuality is going to impact on the so-called traditional family? Dali, let's hear from you, and then Bridget, and then Yoliswa.
Thank you so much. I'm a non-binary Ugandan. And it's really absurd when you look at this bill, if they're talking about protecting the children. We have seen that most of the schools in Uganda are faith-based. So what is not happening right in these schools? Are they giving the children the age-appropriate sex education? And also, Ugandan children lost 2 years of education during the COVID. It didn't happen in any other country. And when the report came through, the ministry showed data that showed an overwhelming number of teenage pregnancies. How many people are persecuted? How many of these offenders were persecuted? We as queer persons in Uganda, we are as scared and concerned about sexual abuse as every Ugandan. And we have laws protecting children. In the penal code, there are laws against all these sexual violations. Why not target the homosexuals? You know, or when you talk about family, our mothers recently came out and wrote an open letter to President Museveni. They love us. Are they going to be persecuted under this bill as promoting homosexuality because they're loving their queer kids? Because they're taking care of their queer kids, taking them to school in all the difficulties, through all the stigma that they face as our parents. I think President Museveni should listen to the cries of our mothers, the mothers of LGBTQ plus persons in Uganda. People are fleeing. I work with FLBK, that's a foundation for LBQ refugees. Ugandans are fleeing their country because of this bill, even before it has been. And we have lost people on the way. We've lost people on the way to seek protection. They are seeking asylum in countries which have molested similar laws. Refugees, Ugandan LGBT refugees are suffering in refugee camps. In countries where they are also not accepted, where they are intimidated, they are told, shut up because we are protecting you, you are in a foreign land, you can't say you need more of what we are giving you.
Dali.
So we call upon all agencies, refugee agencies, to protect queer refugees.
Bridget, let's bring you in.
And just one more thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. I just one more thing. I think it's just a violation of human rights.
Right.
And as Africans, if we are to learn from our history, we can't let this happen under our watch. And to conclude, I say Africa needs a new breed of younger and thoughtful leadership.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Dali, thank you very much. Let's go to Bridget and Yoliswa. We've got about 3 minutes left on the program. Let's take you, Bridget. If you can unmute. All right, go ahead, Bridget.
Good evening. How are you? Good evening. I just want to answer the question tonight that will this create a snowball effect and will other African countries follow suit? I think we've all gotten a sense that we agree there's a violation of basic human rights. And if you look at the backlash that it is getting, even us discussing it tonight, shows that this might be a deterrent to other African countries. If Uganda does not exist in isolation, it exists in an international community. And so we as South Africans and other countries are weighing in and are in solidarity with the LGBTQIA plus people because we recognize that they do have basic human rights. So I believe that no country in Africa would like to receive so much backlash and so much just from all international communities. That will serve as a deterrent.
Yoliswa, thank you very much indeed, Bridget. Let's go to Yoliswa.
Thank you very much. I think my parting words would be that there's everything disingenuous about this bill coming from Uganda. It has no premise. When it even speaks about a nuclear family. What is a nuclear family? When we in Africa right now, it is mostly headed by children, families are mostly headed by women. The economy is based basically on the shoulders of women in this day and age. So we cannot put their family structure as a forefront of why this kind of bill would be at the fore. We'll be debating it, and it's even more disingenuous that as South Africa, we now have to picket against the basic human rights as Africans when we have been so long oppressed as a people, and we are protecting one another. We should be looking at the economy of our countries in Africa as a whole. We should be looking at other issues that make more sense, that build Africa as a continent, other than trying to oppress and suppress one another and trying to kill one another. Because a child, one of these laws in this bill, it talks about a child who's suspected of homosexuality can be imprisoned for 3 years. Why would a child be suspected of homosexuality when it's just being a child? So we're basically sexualizing children now, and that for me speaks to just the common disingenuity around this bill, that it honestly just seeks to oppress a certain kind of people that it deems to not be aligning with whoever it is that has drafted this bill. It's very draconian. It promotes bigotry, promotes everything that is anti-African. In fact, thank you.
All right, thank you very much indeed to all our digital audience. We've run out of time. To Papa D as well as Dr. Motshekga, value added. No doubt it's an ongoing conversation. As you say, Dr. Motshekga, we need to call in interfaith, have these discussions. It's important. Thank you very much indeed. Before we go, here's my take. Empathy, the action of understanding. It's about being aware, about being sensitive to. That's the dictionary meaning. In practical terms, how do we experience the feelings and thoughts of others? Simple. Listen to them. You might agree, you might disagree, but is it worth hating or getting angry because you don't share the same view? Mark Twain said that anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it's stored than to anything on which it's poured. Is our anger informed by understanding or indifference? For many, Easter is a time of rebirth. It's a time of renewal, hope, of love. It's a time when we actively resist the temptation of measuring our worth by trying to prove that others are worthless. So as we reflect and continue to do self-reflection as a nation, as a continent, let us remember that true strength needs to be a function of our respect for one another. And that's my take. If you miss anything, be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube. Stand by for Sports Live up next until 7 p.m. next week. Take care. Bye-bye.